So for decades, the ultimate promise of the internet was basically this borderless utopia,
Oh, absolutely. The whole prevailing wisdom was that data just, it wanted to be free.
right? Flowing across oceans in milliseconds.
Totally indifferent to any lines we draw on maps. I mean, you upload a piece of code or a data set and it effectively just belongs to the globe.
Exactly.
Oh,
But if you look at where the smartest capital is moving right now, and who is actively locking down server racks, that whole borderless cloud narrative is just completely falling apart.
yeah, it really is.
We're basically entering the era of digital checkpoints.
Which is just a massive structural reversal. I mean, we spent 30 years trying to eliminate friction from global networks, and now the biggest tech players are actively engineering that friction right back into the system.
And we actually have the perfect roadmap to understand how and why this is happening. So for today's deep dive, you and I are looking at a really fascinating stack of intelligence from Capgemini.
Right. Specifically, their mid-2026 strategic reports.
Yeah, those reports, their new market designations, and some deep tech insights. And we're not just going to list off tech trends here. We really want to decode the underlying mechanics of what is suddenly being called digital sovereignty.
Which is such a fascinating term.
It is. And to really understand the future of the internet, you actually have to follow the money, right?
Mhm.
The money that's flowing into concrete and steel.
That is the crucial starting point. You really cannot comprehend the digital fracturing we're seeing without first understanding the physical reindustrialization that's happening right now.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Right.
Because Capgemini released their World Wealth Report 2026 on June 4th. And the baseline numbers in there are just staggering.
Oh, they're huge.
The global millionaire population surged by nearly 2 million people in just the single year of 2025.
2 million. Just incredible.
Right. And the report notes this was primarily driven by massive worldwide stock market gains.
Hmm.
So, my instinct is to look at that and assume, okay, this tidal wave of digital globalized wealth is just going to get poured right back into funding the next iteration of borderless software.
Which would make sense historically.
Exactly. But then you look at Capgemini's parallel research, specifically the report titled Reindustrialization of Europe and U.S. 2026.
Right.
And the data shows this capital is taking a hard left turn. Institutional investors are pulling their chips out of the globalized digital casino, essentially, and they are betting heavily on domestic physical factories.
Yeah.
So my hypothesis here is that the people controlling the capital simply, I don't know, got burned too badly by recent global disruptions to trust the old model.
Well, your hypothesis hits the nail on the head. What's fascinating here is the direct causal relationship between that massive accumulation of wealth, the new millionaires, and the sudden boom in local infrastructure.
Because building factories is expensive.
Exactly. Building highly advanced manufacturing facilities domestically is incredibly capital intensive. You need a massive reservoir of liquid wealth, like those 2 million new millionaires and the institutional funds they invest in, just to finance it.
Because, you're fighting against the old economic gravity. For years, the math just said build it across the world where labor is cheap and then ship it over.
Right, but that math relied on a perfectly stable geopolitical climate.
Which we definitely don't have.
No, we don't. It relied on uninterrupted global supply chains. So the mechanism of reindustrialization is essentially an insurance policy against chaos.
Ah, an insurance policy. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because if a disruption in one hemisphere means you suddenly can't manufacture medical supplies or automotive components in the other hemisphere, well, then the cheap labor isn't actually cheap anymore.
Right, because the true cost includes operational paralysis. You just can't build your product.
Yeah, exactly. So regions like Europe and the US, they're making a highly calculated pivot. They are actively funding the return of their industrial bases. But, and this is key, not to recreate the smokestack factories of the 1970s.
Sure, they aren't going backwards.
No, they're building autonomous, highly advanced production centers. They are basically trading peak economic efficiency for peak operational resilience.
So the physical supply chains are contracting. They're pulling back within national borders.
Yeah.
And, if a massive German automotive manufacturer is bringing its critical parts production back home to ensure resilience, the software running those highly automated robotic assembly lines, it has to follow suit.
Right, the brain has to live near the body.
That's a great way to put it. The brain has to live near the body.
Well, the brain fundamentally cannot live halfway across the world anymore. I mean, a modern manufacturing plant operates on a continuous loop of real-time data. You've got sensor networks, artificial intelligence diagnostics, automated logistics.
It's all incredibly data heavy.
Tremendously. And if you are a nation state or, a major corporation within one, you simply cannot allow the data grid that's powering your newly secure, sovereign physical factories to rely on unsovereign digital infrastructure.
Which perfectly brings us to the moment in Capgemini's June 11, 2026 announcements that really, I think, anchors this entire deep dive.
Yes, the SAP announcement.
Right. They announced that they became the first global partner to receive the SAP Sovereign Cloud Partner designation. I just have to pause on that phrasing. Sovereign cloud.
It's a heavy term.
It really is, because the cloud, by its very definition in the public consciousness at least, is supposed to float above geographic jurisdictions.
Yeah, it is the ultimate contradiction in terms, isn't it?
Total oxymoron.
But mechanically, you have to strip away the marketing jargon. The cloud is really just a vast network of physical servers sitting in massive temperature-controlled warehouses.
Right, it's just someone else's computer.
Exactly. So a sovereign cloud is an architectural and legal framework designed to physically lock that data and the processing of that data inside a specific geographic territory.
Meaning, if, say, a smart grid generates data in France, the sovereign cloud architecture guarantees that data never routes through a server in a neighboring country, even if, there happens to be cheaper compute power available there for that millisecond.
Precisely. It stays on French soil, and it's managed by entities that are legally bound only to French jurisdiction.
And that jurisdictional piece is vital, right? I know Capgemini highlights insights from their telecom experts on this.
Yes, specifically Sharad Shrivastava. He contributed to a piece titled Owning the Network: Why Sovereignty is the Next Frontier for Telecoms.
Right, because telecoms are the pipes.
Exactly. Telecoms are recognizing that owning the physical network routing within a nation is now straight up a matter of national security.
Okay, I have to push back here, though, because if we start physically restricting data to national borders, doesn't that inherently break the economic model that built the modern tech industry?
It definitely challenges it.
Right, because the entire premise of, like, AWS or Azure is economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
So if a major tech provider has to build custom, legally isolated data centers for every single country they operate in, that sounds like an operational and financial nightmare.
Oh, it is.
Doesn't this just kill the collaborative open source momentum that really drives global innovation?
Well, it undeniably introduces massive friction. And yes, you're right, it is wildly expensive. But the market isn't making this shift voluntarily.
Okay.
It's actually being forced by the demands of its biggest clients, which are governments. If you look at another piece of Capgemini's source material, the e-government benchmark report, it tracks the steady digitization of public services across the EU.
Right. So things like taxes, municipal infrastructure, healthcare records, judicial proceedings, it is all moving online.
Exactly. And when a government digitizes its core functions, the data it generates is literally the operational lifeblood of the state.
Wow. Yeah.
So no government is going to allow the data powering its electrical grid or, its citizens' medical histories to sit on servers that are subjected to a foreign government's subpoena powers.
Because that would be a massive vulnerability.
A total non-starter. The economies of scale just have to take a back seat. The premium paid for a sovereign cloud is essentially the cost of digital survival for these nations.
Okay, so if the architecture of the internet is fracturing into these localized, highly secure sovereign zones, that fundamentally changes the type of technology you can actually build.
It changes everything.
Right. Because if I'm an engineer, I can't just throw a massive computationally heavy AI model into a centralized global server farm and run the world from there. The compute power has to physically move to where the problem is.
Yes.
Which perfectly bridges into the third major thread in our source stack today, which is the pivot to deep tech.
And Capgemini is incredibly explicit about this shift. They released a strategic insight titled, Deep Tech Needs a Different Playbook Lessons from Quantum.
I love that title.
It's very telling. The premise is that the rules of software development that govern the last 20 years, they are officially obsolete when you start dealing with the physical world.
Okay, let's actually define that for the listener. Because, deep tech gets thrown around as a buzzword constantly, but the sources imply a very specific mechanism here.
Yes, it's not just regular software.
Right. It's not about building a better algorithm for a food delivery app.
Mm-hmm.
Deep tech is rooted in tangible engineering and the physical sciences. So, biology, chemistry, quantum mechanics, it's software that materially manipulates the physical world.
And to operate in that space, your playbook requires absolute precision. You just can't use the old Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things.
Right, because the things you are breaking are drinking water reservoirs or radiation therapy machines.
Exactly. The stakes are entirely different.
Let's get into the specific examples Capgemini provided in the material, because they brilliantly illustrate how this localized physical tech functions. Like take their deployment in Morocco.
Oh, the Water Resources Project.
Yes, they are using AI to protect the country's water resources, specifically by deploying an early detection system for harmful algal blooms.
And if we break down the mechanics of that deployment, you realize it requires a totally different infrastructure than, say, a standard web app.
How so?
Well, you aren't just processing historical data in a vacuum. You are integrating live sensors that are distributed across a physical reservoir.
Okay.
And those sensors are feeding spectral analysis and ecological data into an AI model that has to make immediate, highly accurate determinations about water toxicity.
So it's essentially edge computing taken to the extreme. The intelligence has to be right there at the water's edge.
Exactly.
The sources also mention a project enabling real-time DNA analysis in the field for wildlife conservation. They're giving conservationists the ability to conduct genetic sequencing right there in the wild to protect vulnerable species.
Which is incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
And again, you can't rely on a spotty internet connection to ping a server in another hemisphere when you're dealing with real-time biological data in a fragile ecosystem.
Yeah.
The processing just has to be local.
And this localization requirement, it extends to the most complex manufacturing on the planet, too. Capgemini detailed their work with Pininfarina, the legendary Italian design house.
Oh, right, the car designers.
Exactly. They're using Dassault Systems' 3D Experience platform to create what they call virtual twins of custom vehicles.
I really love the concept of the virtual twin. It's not just a 3D model you look at on a screen, right? Mechanically, it's like having a real-time shadow of a physical car existing on a server.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. Because the platform completely integrates the 3D representation with the physical manufacturing processes and the company's enterprise resource planning systems. So if an engineer tweaks the aerodynamics of the digital shadow, the physical robotics on the assembly line understand the updated parameters instantly.
Right. But think about the infrastructure required to make that virtual twin function securely.
Yeah.
If you are Pininfarina, your proprietary design data and your localized assembly line telemetry are literally your most valuable intellectual property.
Oh, for sure.
You cannot afford the latency of routing that data globally, and you certainly cannot risk the data sovereignty issues of hosting that proprietary integration on an unsecured, borderless cloud. The virtual twin practically demands a sovereign cloud environment to function at an enterprise scale.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the stakes get even higher when you look at their client story involving electrogenics labs.
Yes, the medical application.
Right. Capgemini is supporting the development of a product called the Skin Integrated System, and this is designed to improve patient care in radiation therapy. The mechanism here is just intense. It physically measures the exact radiation dose being applied to a patient's skin in real time.
To ensure accurate dose verification. Yeah. And in that scenario, there is zero margin for error. I mean, in a standard cloud architecture, a few milliseconds of latency might mean a web page takes slightly longer to load. Who cares, right?
Minor inconvenience.
But in the Skin deployment, latency or a dropped connection during live radiation therapy could be catastrophic. The processing, the data capture, the analytics, it all has to happen securely, instantaneously, and locally.
So let me just game this out for a second.
Sure.
For the last 2 decades, the holy grail for a tech startup or developer was this idea of unconstrained global scale.
Build once, deploy everywhere.
Exactly. You write a piece of software, host it on a centralized server, and overnight you have access to 4 billion potential users across 100 countries without changing a line of code. But if what we're seeing from Capgemini's intelligence is the new reality, that era is kind of dead.
Mm-hmm.
Are we seeing a definitive end to that global deployment model?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, yeah. The monolithic global deployment model is definitely fracturing. The new metric for success isn't unconstrained scale anymore. It's depth of integration.
Depth of integration.
Yeah, Capgemini explicitly states in their documentation that they deliver value through what they call a people-centric approach and unique human AI chemistry.
Human AI chemistry. That implies that AI isn't just an invisible oracle running in a distant server farm anymore. It's becoming an active, localized partner.
Precisely. It is artificial intelligence functioning alongside a conservationist in a field or, alongside a radiologist in a clinic or a factory manager on a reindustrialized assembly line. When technology moves from the digital ether into the physical world, it is immediately subjected to the laws, the borders, and the physical constraints of that real world.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've traced a pretty fascinating path through this intelligence stack today. We started with 2 million newly minted millionaires funneling wealth out of global markets and into physical, localized reindustrialization. We saw how securing those physical factories demands secure digital borders, which leads directly to Capgemini's push into SAP sovereign clouds and localized telecom networks. And finally, we explored how this localized infrastructure acts as the foundation for deep tech.
Allowing AI to actively manipulate everything from Moroccan water reservoirs to real-time radiation dosages, all without latency or security risks.
Exactly. So the foundational takeaway here is that borders matter again. We spent a generation pretending geography was irrelevant in the digital age. But as supply chains prove fragile and governments awaken to the security vulnerabilities of borderless data, geography is definitely reasserting itself. The internet is rebuilding its walls.
It really is. The era of frictionless global tech is giving way to an era of high-friction, high-precision local tech.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
It is. If you are building a company, investing in a platform, or just trying to understand where the digital world is heading, you have to factor in sovereignty. The future is highly advanced, incredibly sophisticated, but is fundamentally fenced in. But, this raises an important question, though. And it's a thought I think we all need to sit with as this new architecture solidifies.
Okay, what is it?
We know the physical infrastructure of the internet is fracturing into sovereign jurisdictional zones. But what happens to the global digital culture that rode on top of that infrastructure?
Oh, that is a profound point. The culture is downstream of the architecture.
Exactly. We've taken for granted that an idea, a piece of open source code, or even just a cultural movement can spread seamlessly across the globe in seconds. But if the underlying data can no longer legally cross a border without passing through a sovereign digital checkpoint, what happens to the ideas embedded in that data?
Right.
Do our shared global conversations eventually get stopped at the border too?
Man, that is a brilliant and honestly slightly unsettling thought to leave you with. If the servers are forced to carry passports, does innovation get trapped in customs? It is definitely something to watch very closely as these sovereign clouds come online. So, keep questioning the architecture of the digital world around you. Pay attention to where the borders are being drawn, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.